Welcome to Winden Caves. I'm Bubba.
And I'm Tiny.
And today we're covering Episode 5, Life and Death, and Episode 6, Light and Shadow from Season 3. Tiny, what should our listeners do?
If you are not through Episode 6, Season 3, then you should pause because this podcast is going to contain lots of spoilers. Re-listen to Winden Caves podcast, Seasons 1, Seasons 2, and through the episode you are in Season 3.
Tiny, you know, one of the most fun things to do when you're watching Dark is try to talk about it with your friends because it's so complex, it's so crazy, it's so... Fun is the wrong word, but it is a mental Olympics to keep up with the show, isn't it?
It definitely is. We keep each other on toe, and that's why this week we've invited a special friend to help us keep everything straight, and he brings new excitement and new theories.
So, listeners, in these final 2 episodes, we're going to be bringing in some of our dark friends, and let's get to it right now. Tiny, we've got Lamb here with us. Lamb, how are you doing? Welcome to Winden Caves.
Well, thank you. I'm doing great. It was some crazy episodes tonight.
Lamb, let our double L's know.
Loyal listeners.
Let them know your dark history. How did you get into this show? Why do you like it?
Oh, so I started watching it, I think, right when it came out. It was one of the things that Netflix threw up at me. And I enjoyed the first season, watched it. Really didn't think that there would ever be a second season. Just figured that this was going to be one of those things that went away. And then when the second season came out, I had to take a flight to Europe. And so I downloaded all of them to my laptop and stayed up the entire flight and watched the entire second season at once. And that was when I decided, and then people would say, like, Did you like it? And I said it was great. And they said, should I watch it? I said, don't. If you haven't watched it, just wait until season 3 comes out and watch it all together.
That's good advice. It's so hard to track.
Absolutely. I couldn't keep track of who was who, and I couldn't remember. I wasn't fully prepared to remember what happened in season 1 when I watched season 2.
So much fun. Listeners, do you have a story like this? We want you to be one of our friends. We want you to be a double T.
Time traveler.
And the way you can become a time traveler and a double L.
Loyal listener.
Is to hashtag out Winden Caves Podcast. That's the word Winden Caves, plural, podcast singular, on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook. YouTube comments do it. We want to find you because, Tiny, we've got a great contest going for Season 3.
That's right, listeners. If you hashtag Winden Caves Podcast, all one word, you have a very rare and special opportunity to win an enormous prize.
The English language version of the book from the show that H.G. Tannhaus wrote, A Journey Through Time. We're going to be giving it away to one listener who out on social media hashtags out Winden Caves Podcast, or if you give us a written review on iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts, give us a written review and you can be eligible to win. So there's 2 ways to enter. And kindly enough, this week we got 4 new reviews on iTunes. We got a review from Yup OK, BB and GA, Joe Bear, and 5-star review from Goog Caddish. Tiny, you want me to read it?
Yes, thanks, Goog Caddish.
5 stars. The title of the review is Netflix's Darkest Series on a Comedy Podcast. Does it work? Yes. Oh, thank you so much.
Wow.
They wrote, who would think that a light and funny podcast like this would be the right way to cover Dark, the most serious, mind-bending Netflix series ever? It brings the fun and the analysis I enjoy.
Wow. Thanks, Goog Caddish.
Thank you. Everybody who leaves a review, that's another entry into the big bowl where we're going to draw out a winner from our Time Traveler crew at the end of this season. We've also got some great feedback we're going to be going over at the end of the podcast, but it is time to get into these 2 episodes. Lamb, you're our guest. How are you knowing that there are 2 episodes left in the series? How you doing?
You know, this is a weird... It's gotten to such a weird place that it could end at any moment. It could just stop and then you'd be like, oh, okay, that was the end. Knowing that there's 2 more episodes, I've no idea. There's going to be a lot of twists and turns coming up.
Tiny, how are you feeling? Only 2 episodes left.
You know, what I was thinking when Lamb was talking about watching this suggested by Netflix, I was thinking what odd Netflix category Lamb had up on his Netflix suggestions. I mean, what kind of weird Netflix category is this labeled by? Obviously, I found Dark through Bubba, and he introduced me to Dark, but I mean, I'm in the same place as Lamb. It is, you really felt like, you know, I know we're going to talk more deeply about these episodes, but you really felt like you're building up to the end in episode 6.
Oh, yeah. How about this? Would you be satisfied? Let's go around the horn. Lamb, you first. Would you have been satisfied if that was the end of the series?
No. There's too many things that have to be wrapped up at this point. You don't know, did anything change?
Tiny.
You know, I think, I don't think satisfied is the right word. I wouldn't have been satisfied. I'm with Lamb. Things need to be wrapped up. But would I've been like, well, that in a weird way kind of makes sense and is a little bit of a cliffhanger that, you know, again, if we get to the end of the season and it is a cliffhanger, I'm not going to be that surprised.
Okay, I would not be satisfied just because I want more. Episode 5, Life and Death, that about broke me with some of the heartbreaking deaths. But episode 6, it was incredible. I was screaming, oh, somebody's got to do this. And then the show would have show somebody doing this. I'm on board. These next 2 episodes, I hope they knock me out of the park. I hope the apocalypse hits me because what a way to go out. This is really fun. Listeners, I've got some more questions that we're going to do around the horn first, but we want to say, because there are only 2 more episodes, the Winden Caves podcast left, or are there? We want you to follow us on all the other shows we've done. We've done podcast reviews of not just Dark. We've done Game of Thrones, Twin Peaks, Babylon Berlin, The Mandalorian, The Last Kingdom, The Terror, Ash vs. Evil Dead, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Knurl, Dublin Murders, The Strain, The Rook, Emerald City, Penny Dreadful, City of Angels. We've got them so much. We want you to join us on all these shows. So once again, please become a Double T Time Traveler at Double PHQ on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook.com/Double PHQ.
You know what I'm thinking, Bubba? I see people post on social media. Everybody's locked in their house on quarantine, and I see so many posts around what should I watch next? And maybe people are thinking in the wrong time order. They should be going to Double P to see what they can listen to a podcast on and choose their shows that way.
That's the only way, Tony. Thank you for saying it. All right, so guys, before we break down these episodes in depth, just some rapid-fire questions. Episode 5. It was incredible, but it was also heartbreaking, painful to watch. It was so tough. That episode featured 3 deaths. We had Jonas, one version of Jonas shot and killed. We had Peter in our world, Prime World, stabbed trying to save his daughter from that scavenger. And we had Katharina in 1987 being killed by her own mom. Let's go around the horn. Tiny, I'll come to you first. Which was the most painful death?
Well, first of all, I would say all these deaths were so violent relative to the suspenseful deaths that we've seen before. But for me, it was Peter, hands down, because, you know, just when it starts, I started thinking about Noah saying, I'm going to take care of her when you are killed. And so you kind of know what's going to happen for there to be a child to witness it. For me, that was the most painful death to watch. I almost had the blanket over my face with that.
Liam, for you, episode 5, most painful death.
The knife to the neck hurt. It hurt a lot just because the build-up to it as well and the strangeness of it. But Katharina being killed by her mother. Her mother thought she was the aborted baby that she had and recognized her, and that's how she placed her. I felt like Katharina had a chance a couple times to have actually overpowered her mother and taken it, but she pulled back because she knew it was her mother, while her mother believed it was her child, but from hell, and so went ahead and crushed her skull and then hid the body and did a very good job. And wow, that was such a weird...
Well, her mother had some practice. We found out later in the episode, had some practice slapping around Katharina.
Yeah. Oh, it's both so terrible. I'm going to go in and put my vote on the scale with Katharina's death just because the added horrificness of it, of not a violent stranger as killed poor Peter, but your parent killing you. Oh, my God, it's terrible. Now, I want to say that Jonas's death, who nobody voted for, I want to point out that we host this podcast. We love doing this show for you listeners, but this was one of the times I swear to Adam and Eva, I wish I didn't watch the show so closely. Because we did podcasts on episodes 1 and 2, and then we immediately watched episodes 3 and 4 and did another podcast, Tiny. We had a couple days, so I thought I'll rewatch season 3 episodes 1 through 4 again before this. And watching them, I saw all the signs that Jonas was going to get shot and killed. There are hints in there. When whatever you want to call alt-world Martha, who's in 1888, and Bartosz brings her down to Adam's lair in that world, she looks at the floor. And even the first time I had watched it, I thought, boy, this is an awful lot of like in season 2 where stranger Jonas kept looking at the floor in the Kahnwald house where Martha was going to be shot. At the time, the first time I watched it, I thought, oh, this is probably alt-world Martha thinking, oh, that's the spot where the family trees are in Eva's lair. But watching it a second time, I was like, no. Oh, no. And then sure enough, in one of the episodes, there's a bunch of quick flashes, and it really hinted that Jonas was going to get shot. So that didn't shock me too much. I wish it had shocked me as much as it could have, but it was like, oh, man.
Yeah, the listeners know I don't watch as closely as Bubba, but for some reason, I wasn't that surprised either.
How about you, Lamb? Jonas's death.
Honestly, I think that Jonas was that was the best out for him at that moment because he was suddenly surrounded by 4 angry ex-girlfriends. But yeah, I was shocked at that point. I loved that the youngest Martha was wearing his yellow rain jacket.
Yep.
To really pull it full circle. But it's one of those moments that I had where right as soon as she pulled the gun out and shot him, I was like, oh. This is the same moment.
The beginning of episode 6, Light and Shadow, where suddenly we saw a version of the apocalypse in our world, Prime World, where Jonas didn't get saved. I was like high-fiving. I was like, yes, of course, this is great. They've changed time. Or have they changed time? Boy, that is a question we'll have to get to at the end of the series.
Oh, hold on. I have a comment. You just said Prime World. Just because we started with that world, I don't know if it's the Prime World, because if you think about it, the newer world that we saw was the world that would have happened without all the time travel. So I feel like that might have been the Prime World, and the one we've been watching is the result of...
Alt World.
It is the Alt World.
I understand that theory. For organizational sake, we're still going to call it Prime World, if that's okay.
Fair enough.
All right. More questions before we dive into the episodes as a whole. And this is one that's been on my mind for a while. Dark is a German show. We love it. It's hopping around through time. But this is a German show which has never visited World War I or World War II. Is that odd that it hasn't? Tiny, you go first. What do you think?
I just don't think it's part of the story. I mean, maybe with maybe when the show writers put it together, they carefully avoided those, it would just have added too much complexity. These people in Winden seem so isolated from the rest of the world that if you bring in any other world events, it kind of bursts that bubble a little bit.
Okay. How do you feel, Lamb? World War I and World War II aren't in Dark. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think that was a luck of the math, right? Mm-hmm. You go back 30 years, and you just happen to miss it by that much. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I think Winden, even if it was in the middle of World War II or World War I, I don't think those would have affected Winden. I think that place is crazy, isolated from everything else.
Terrible thought that I thought of when I was thinking up this question is that the children we meet in 1953 and 1954, depending on how the timeline works, they would have been born in the middle of World War II or immediately afterwards. Plus, how about the adult men we meet in 1953-54? Bernd Doppler, Daniel Kahnwald, H.G. Tannhaus, and Egon Tiedemann. Would they have been Nazi soldiers a decade earlier? Let's not think about how disturbing that could be. But one of the questions you always think about. Now, I mentioned there are only 2 episodes left. There is theoretically a lot of story we have to cover. And so I want to know from you guys, how okay will you be if Dark never answers certain questions? Let's go to you first, Lamb. We know that in one world we see Wohler, the policeman who has a missing eye. In the alt world, for lack of a better word, he's missing an arm. Will you be okay if Dark never answers how Wohler got these injuries?
No, I think that's the main mystery to Dark. If they don't answer what happened to poor Wohler. I assume a bear. That's mine. I'm on record now.
Oh, very good.
Called it.
Tiny, are you going to be okay? I know you love Wohler. He's been such a fun character in a very dark, unfun show.
Yeah, I do love Wohler, but I'm okay. I think it's more funny to speculate about what might have happened. I mean, we all know it's the bear now, but it's fun to talk about.
Okay, here's some other questions that may never get answered. There's some characters who are screwed in either world, specifically Eric Oppendorf. I'm going to assume Jantje Friese, the deaf boy, and Mads Nielsen. Both worlds, they met terrible fates as they were dying in various attempts to develop a time machine. Is it okay if you never learn why those three particularly had to die? Tiny.
Yeah, I don't. Either way, I'm okay if we don't learn that.
Yeah. Those ones, those aren't central to. Those are kind of the detritus around the more interesting mysteries.
Okay, one final one. In season 1, we kept seeing a version of Michael Kahnwald, a.k.a. Adult Mikkel, in Jonas's dreams and nightmares, where he seemed to be covered in black paint, covered in black oil. In this alt world, we've seen a version of Martha, or Martha herself saw a version of Martha covered in this black paint, black oil. Do they have to answer that?
I was very confused when I saw that. I did not put together that mirrored Mikkel. I don't think they have to, but I would like them to. I don't know.
Tiny.
I think the black is residue god particle.
It could be. We always saw Michael Kahnwald as a painter who seemed to have a lot of dark smudges and things in his. That's why I said it could be paint. I call it black oil, I think, based on certain shows. They've always had black oil be an important part of something. So I hope they answer it. Once again, somehow, some way, I'm praying for a happy ending. And maybe these black-covered versions of our characters is the paradise that everybody assumes might be part of a prophecy.
It's the endless darkness.
It sure is.
So one thing I would like resolved is around Task Force Clausen. Who summoned him to Winden by saying his missing brother might be there? This is in season 2.
Mm-hmm.
Who was Task Force Clausen's brother, and where is Task Force Clausen? I mean, I think that the writers of the show are so particular, it seems odd that they would bring in this character who was completely not in Winden, and then just drop him like a rock in season 3. So, I mean, I think he's got to have some sort of loop to him.
Absolutely. It was driving me crazy all season 3 that he never showed up. He was such a wild card in season 2. He drove so much of the narrative forward that as soon as he got those cans opened and the apocalypse started, he went with it.
He was the only one to look at the elephant a different way.
R.I.P. Well, we saw his dead body. Peter saw it in the tent in what I call Prime World. So he didn't survive that one. We didn't see him at all in Alt World. But in Alt World, theoretically, his brother did die. We found out in the episode 6 of season 3 that Alexander claims it was an accident that killed this brother, whose identity he took. But, yeah, I don't know. The fact that we haven't seen him yet makes me wonder if we've had our time with the task force.
Oh, you think it was just a wild goose chase?
I don't know.
A red herring.
It could be. Guys, I decided to map out as best I could the characters who are alive who didn't need time travel for their existence. This whole podcast, Tiny, every Winden Caves podcast since season 2, we seem to be talking about, well, who needs time travel to actually exist? We always say, well, Jonas has to exist with time travel. Obviously, we were like Charlotte and Elizabeth and Francisca. At season 2, we knew they needed time travel to exist. We're finding out that so many characters do need time travel to exist, but I thought I'd go through the ones that don't. So Daniel Kahnwald and his daughter Inez, who, of course, adopts Michael, we haven't seen that they need time travel to exist. The Dopplers, Bernd Doppler, his wife Greta, the son Helga, and Helga's son, Peter. We haven't seen any sign that they need time travel to exist. I put H.G. Tannhaus in that family tree because he adopts Charlotte, who marries Peter, but those people don't seem to need time travel. On the Tiedemann side, Egon, his wife Doris, and their daughter Claudia, we haven't seen them need time travel to exist. And Alexander/Boris Newald, as we know, not him. On the Nielsen side, though, it seems to be only the wives, meaning Tronte's wife, Jana, and Ulrich's wife, Katharina. They don't seem to need time travel. The outliers are Task Force Clausen, the Wohler boys, One-Eyed Cop Torben, and Benjamin, a.k.a. Benny Bernadette, Katharina's parents, including her terrible mother, the Oppendorfs, and Yassen. Those seem to be the people who don't need time travel to exist.
So the interesting thing with that list, to me, is the people who don't need time travel are not really on a team, except for the Tiedemans.
Right. Claudia is. And Egon, as we saw in the alt world, Egon survives and he becomes part of the Sic Mundus crew on that side, for lack of a
right,
word.
Right. So it's just interesting that a lot of these people who don't need time travel weren't recruited to pursue one world or the other.
Makes total sense. Mm-hmm. The whole reason they're on one team or another is because they know that if the world continues or ends, then that affects their lives. Right. Everyone else is just living their life. If you didn't have an infinite loop to continue to live, you wouldn't fight for one side or the other.
Lazy.
Okay, well, I think that's going to be a great intro into our breakdown of these episodes. Let's go around the horn. Which side are you on? If there are even sides, it seems like. Are you on Team Eva or Team Adam?
Well, the loyal listeners know I've been on both, but we used to call it Team Adam and Team Claudia.
Right.
But I'm going to stick with our main protagonist, and I'm going to go Team Adam. Really, mainly because Magnus and Francesca are two of my favorite characters.
Okay. Lamb, how do you feel? Which team you on? If you have to be on a team.
Yeah, no, I want it all burned down. I want it all burned to the ground. I want everyone to die. I'm totally on Team Adam. And I think it's because if Eva wins, then the show never ends, right? Mm-hmm. You just start watching season 1 again and keep going. Mm-hmm. But for there to be exactly for there to be a resolution payoff, I think that it has to end.
All right, that's a great setup. Let's dive into them. Listeners, we're going to try to keep these as straight as possible, meaning they're going to be crooked and messy as hell, but let's see what we can do. We're going to go to what we've been calling the Alt World 2019. Jonas wakes up after his night of baby making.
With his aunt.
Well, once again, in this world, is she his aunt? Because he doesn't exist in this world. Either way, they're getting busy making cleft-lip 3. He wakes up, he has a dream of a nightmare or a dream of his Martha, but then he wakes up with Alt Martha. They're going to head to the power plant. We're going to stop this apocalypse. Alt Martha seems like she wants to say something to Jonas, but then stops herself from saying. Does this version of Alt Martha, is it just she has deja vu and knows what's coming, or could she possibly know the fate that this version of Jonas would hit? Do you guys have any idea what she might have wanted to say to Jonas?
Probably his last name. I think, remember, this Martha has known this guy for what, a day or two?
A couple of days, that's true.
Yeah, and I love the fact that, this guy shows up out of nowhere, explains all of this time travel and dimension hopping, and that he's really her nephew, and she's fine having sex with him.
He's much better than her boyfriend in that version.
Yeah, right.
Tony, any thoughts there, or just...
I didn't read that much into it, but now that you said it, it seems like maybe I don't know what she wanted to say.
They go downstairs. She gives a hug to her mother, Alt Katrina. They head to the power plant. They're cutting in. They're going to stop the apocalypse. When Alt Martha cuts her eye, and Jonas starts freaking out. Everything is repeating. He's seen her with that cut, so this must have happened. Why did Eva lie? To me, it felt like Jonas had a wake-up moment. No matter what I do, it gets worse and worse and worse. He's like, I'm going to head back to Eva and find out what's going on.
Feels kind of late in the game for him to realize that things are getting worse and worse and worse.
I thought it was a great move. I was excited at that moment. But they do have a debate before they go to see her. they debate, what if only one world can make it? Do you guys have a preference? If you had to flip a coin and say, okay, that's the world that we're not going to have the apocalypse in, that's the world that I'm going to save.
Well, for me, if she loves him, it would have to be his world because that's the only one he exists in. I don't really understand. And with her world, I don't really understand what's worth fighting for. Mikkel? I mean...
Yeah, boy, this is tricky. Lamp, if you had to pick a world, which one are you going to save?
I would save the alt world, meaning the newer one. I'm going with your version of alt. And it's mostly because it doesn't have all these loops built into it yet, or as many. Mm-hmm. It's a cleaner version of the world. I think that if you were to save the other world, it would find a way to blow itself up again in 30 years.
That's a good point.
That's
it's just a
probably
Band-Aid that they're trying to put on it.
Exactly.
Okay. Jonas, when she asks him this, he's like, I am in love with you, but a different version of you. He says, I'm wrong here. And they go into Eva's lair. Eva enters, and so it begins. Eva tells Jonas there's no way back for him. Eva says the classic man lives 3 lives line that we heard from Adam in season 2. The death of naivety, the death of innocence, the death of life. And then I kind of felt proud of myself, Tiny, because on the previous episode I said, well, there are kind of 4 versions of Alt Martha. And then we saw them all in one room as they come in to kill Jonas. Oh, one of them, I forget which one, maybe Stranger Martha says, you have accomplished what you were sent to this world to accomplish. I assume that means knock up Alta Martha. Yeah. They shoot him. He dies. He gives her the St. Christopher necklace, which I'm pretty sure he took off the dead version of her in the prime first world. Boogity, oggity, oggity. Should Alt Martha, the youngest version of Alt Martha, the one who just found out about time travel, who's known Jonas 3 days, should she be so sad that this man has died? Because she was. She's destroyed. Will she trust her other versions of herself? This is crazy.
You know, I mean, how much of it is sadness and how much of it is... wow, that's a different version of me shooting. I mean, it's just got to be mind-blowing to process.
I'm surprised they don't drink more. Nobody's drinking that much in this movie. One of the things I keep coming around, I think this goes back to what Jonas experienced when he saw Martha cut her eye, is if everything does keep looping, what choice is the right choice? What choice isn't the one you're being forced? Do you have free will at all? If he decided to go forward, was that the thing that caused everything? Or if he decided to go back, is that the thing that causes everything? So you can't know.
Or if it's already all written anyway. Yeah, he's already made the choice.
Damned if you do, damned if you don't.
Right. And so none of these people really have free will, which is why I think that the burned husk of Jonas, the Adam, is probably the best character because I think he's the only one trying to find free will.
I like that. I like that.
I like that too.
Covering some of the other plot lines of Alt 2019, we do have to see what sets up the apocalypse. So in this version of the world, it's Alt Hannah has blackmailed Alt Alexander to take care of Alt Charlotte because she's having an affair with Alt Ulrich. And the way Alt Alexander does it, I assume, was to maybe give her radiation or something from the plant. Why did Alt Alexander bring Alt Charlotte in there and open up the canisters, which caused the apocalypse in that world? Why did he do it?
Yeah, I've been trying to figure that out. Who was blackmailing him?
Hannah. Hannah was blackmailing him because she knew he was really Boris. In both worlds, she blackmails him, and theoretically, this is how he's going to take care of the trouble. He's going to do Hannah's bidding and take care of Charlotte. And that causes the apocalypse. Hannah, if she hasn't made enough mistakes, good work. Alt Hannah.
And remember, it happens days earlier in this world.
Oh, yeah. No, it happens months earlier, actually.
Yeah, way earlier in this world. So I'm amazed that he does this, that he pulls this stuff out. And number one, why isn't it covered in concrete? Didn't they do that?
In the Prime world, that's correct. But they did that in 2020. The alt world didn't even reach 2020 before the apocalypse hit them. So just damned if you do, damned if you don't. Alt Martha, once again, the youngest one, the one who just learned about time travel and the one who just became pregnant with cleft-lip 3, she throws away the yellow jacket. She's trying to prevent it still. She goes to Bartosz. She's like, listen, your father did this. Help me stop it. She's desperately trying to stop it when who stops her but Prime World, old Franziska, and Prime Magnus. They have traveled, and they're the ones who convince her to go save Prime World Jonas, a.k.a. the end of Season 2. You've always been a fan of Franziska. I assume you've come around on Magnus. How did you feel about knowing they were the ones?
I don't remember ever disliking Magnus that much.
Everybody travel through time and listen to the very first Winden Caves podcast. You'll hear Tiny dissing Magnus. I like them as a couple. They died in the alt world.
Uh-huh.
And yet in what we're calling the Prime World, they've survived and they go back and get her. Alt Bartosz is saved by an older version of himself, Alt Bartosz, because he seems to be a part of Eva's Sigmundus. But that also confirms, if this isn't crazy enough, that at the beginning of Season 2, when they're digging out the cave, it is old Bartosz who gets killed by young Noah in the 1920s. So we always suspected that was true.
How did you know it was confirmed?
Well, it's the same actor. Meaning the same actor who she says, old Bartosz, go save yourself. That actor we saw in the beginning of Season 2 digging the cave tunnel with young Noah, and young Noah later takes the pickaxe and kills him. So this is finally confirmed that is Bartosz.
Well, I have hated Noah from the beginning. That we can all agree on.
Elizabeth loves him, theoretically in both worlds.
But now they're on opposite teams.
Ooh, boy, that is a good point there, Tiny. That is a real good point. We're going to have to go down that rabbit hole in next week's episode, because in Prime World, the love of her life, Noah, is killed by her sister Agnes because Jonas wants it to be done. In Alt World, maybe Noah survives. We'll go down that rabbit hole in a bit. We haven't heard your thoughts on Noah, young or old. Liam, since you're new to the podcast, how have you felt about our favorite questionable reverend?
Yeah, I don't like him at all in any version when he's good or bad. He's creepy. When he's not being creepy, he's evil. So he's not someone I would trust. I'm honestly surprised that he did end up with the mute girl, Elizabeth. I liked her a lot more. I also don't know, are they on different teams because she needs time travel to survive and he doesn't?
Well, the big trick would be is he got off Adam's team. This is so crazy. We don't know enough
on both teams.
Right, we don't know enough about alt-world Noah, so let's leave him to the side.
Switch hitter.
But Prime Noah, we know at some point he was on Team Claudia, because then when he kills old White Devil Claudia in Prime World, he says, I'm not your puppet anymore. So even ignore that part of it. We know he was on Team Adam until he got the missing pages from the book, which theoretically explained to him what happened with his daughter, Charlotte. He felt Adam had kept that from him. So then he switched, what you would say, almost back to Team Claudia again. Boy, this is too crazy. And Elizabeth, as we saw, Elizabeth is on Team Adam at least, because she and her mother-daughter, Charlotte, in the Prime World 2053, get in the God particle and go somewhere to theoretically clean up some missing mistakes.
Right.
Did that make any sense?
None of this does.
Okay, so let's get back to Alt-World Post-Apocalypse 2052. We see, I'm pretty sure, the cleft-lip 3 fire up the God particle there, and then they split up. Young cleft-lip and oldest cleft-lip go to one world to the event in 1986. Another thing I mentioned on last week's podcast, we never saw it. They go to one world 1986 and start the thing that's going to create the God particle. Adult or middle-aged cleft-lip goes to another world, and they split up. A couple of things. Lamb, you pointed out it's so important to know. The cleft-lip switches sides.
Yeah. Are there good and bad versions of them? Are these the A and B versions? And if they are, as your theory that this is the baby that starts it all, right? How can there be two of them if there's just
which
one?
Which side is a scar on for you to want to invite them to your barbecue this weekend?
Right. As long as I need people strangled at my barbecue, it doesn't matter.
I got a crazy question. Of the cleft-lip 3, Which is the creepiest?
The little one.
It is the little one. That's what I agree. That kid is a great creepy actor. He is the creepiest. Oh, my goodness gracious. Oh, brother. You agree, Lamb, that it's Junior?
Yeah, there's creepy kids are... I mean, the old guy, he just looks confused.
Yes.
Well, what I always say about cleft-lip 3 is he's like, I've done all this twice over. I got to do it again? Okay, let's go. Here we go again. Oh, boy. Was I this annoying when I was a kid? Apparently.
Right. But the kid, you got to wonder, right? So, like, just older versions of you show up, and they're like, hey, let's go kill a bunch of people. And you at 8 are like, okay, cool, let's do this. This is a good idea.
Okay, I should point out that also in 2052 Alt-World Apocalypse, we see the 3 older versions of Alt Martha again. Eva, Stranger Martha, and the Alt Martha who's kind of been through all this stuff and has the scar on her face. It turns out she's the one who writes the letter that comes to Prime World, our world, Stranger Jonas, at the end of Season 2 to prevent him from killing Adam. Man, this is crazy. They describe this infinite loop as, yes, it's an infinite loop, but there's an outer edge and an inner edge, an outer line and an inner line. They both follow the same path, but they both have a connecting point, a quantum entanglement, they even call it. Is anybody here a physicist?
No.
Not today.
Not today. Okay, does anybody want to... Does that make sense? That there are two sides of the line that's going in that's an infinite symbol? Let's hear it. Let's hear it.
So what they're saying is that in an infinity symbol, you can continue around making a single circle.
Right. Okay.
Which a circle is also a line that never breaks, right?
Perfect.
Or at the inflection point, you could jump over to the other circle. So you could... At that inflection point, you have that choice. Do I go save Jonas and with my magic apple and bring him to the alt world, or does Jonas run to the basement and save himself?
Lamb just earned his keep. Good work, Lamb.
Yeah, you just did a visual.
I did take physics in high school, so there you go.
Oh man, one up on Bubba. I never did that. Okay, let's now jump to the Prime World. So in 1888, listeners, I know in previous podcasts I've been saying this was 1881. No one told me there'd be math involved at dark, but no, 33 years before is 1888. The character we call Stranger Jonas, he wakes up and he reads the letter that he got at the end of Season 2, which prevented him from staying in the house and shooting and killing Adam. It's from Martha. Some of the things she wrote in the letter were, Dear Jonas, you promised to make everything right again, to untie the knot at the end. But the apocalypse must happen. You must let me die so we can live. And he burnt the letter. Of course, later on, Stranger Martha enters this world, Prime World, in 1888, and leaves him for him again after he burned it, which is pretty much a mirror thing of what happened with Jonas and Michael Kahnwald's suicide note. He burnt it, and then he was given it, and same thing here.
That was so terrible.
What is Stranger Jonas's fate? I suppose it's to end up as Adam, but what does that even mean?
Well, how does Eva age so much better than Adam?
You're saying that Adam is just gross looking.
Yeah.
Women use moisturizer, men don't. This is what happens.
Has he traveled more? I don't know if he has. Boy, this is so confusing. Has Jonas traveled more than
I thought that was our theory before, and I thought he even said that the time travel took a toll on you, but, you know, Eva looks pretty good. Concave a little in the cheeks, but pretty good.
That's what happens, right? You get older, you concave in the cheeks.
Well, she had one of them carved out for her, too. So that helps.
Theoretically, we're going to see that happen. And it happens after she is held in a cage by Adam in the Prime World, and after Adam tries to kill the cleft-lip 3 at the event at the end of Episode 6. So however she's going to get that scar on her face, we're going to see that in the final 2 episodes. Woohoo! A reason to continue watching.
I was sure we were going to see, way back in Episode 2 or 3, I think, when Alt-World Martha gave him what she said was the last ball of God particle.
Oh, yeah. She was like,
I thought it was going to be booby-trapped, and it would blow up in his face, and that's how he'd get all scarred.
Oh, man, that would be good.
That would be good.
And
or could have been the old bear attack. Could have been that too.
After he finished with Waller, just peeled Jonas' skin right off. Right. It throws the bear at him.
Okay, so we do have to talk about some painful stuff in Prime World. The first world we dealt with, 1987. So let's just get to it. Katharina is plotting to break out Ulrich. Ulrich, there's a part of me that thinks Ulrich knows this won't work. He does apologize for everything he did to his wife, and he was unfaithful, so that's good. But stranger Jonas told Katharina in Season 2, he's like, it can't work because I exist. Mikkel can't be brought back in time. And I felt like she was doomed from the start. But the way she went out, just absolutely terrible. And for me, the real breaking point was, number one, I thought, why not just sneak into your house? You may know how to sneak into your house and get the key card then. Why mug your mom with a knife? I thought that was a poor plan. But then when she's fighting, and the first time she says, Mama, let me go. Oh, my God, that was brutal. Brutal.
Ulrich and Katharina are like the Keystone Cops here. They are so unprepared compared to everybody else for time travel. Just fumbling around, falling out. They don't really accomplish anything. Even Ulrich, he manages to not kill
Helga, right?
Right, Helga. He just bashes and gives him some scars or missing an eye. He doesn't. How do you? He's a grown man. How does he not succeed?
Yeah, I mean, Katharina's mom gets the job done.
Right, and Katharina can't. These two are. That's where Ulrich was probably like, listen, just let me stay here. We're better off being watched over by other people.
We should point out that in Season 2, it was Bartosz and Magnus trying to tease Martha and get her scared by saying, hey, have you heard the story of the woman who drowns in the lake? And it turns out to be Magnus and Martha's mother, Katharina, who is theoretically the story behind the drowned woman in the lake. The St. Christopher necklace, which if we're trying to follow it, which is probably impossible, but Egon gave it to Hannah. Hannah then left it for Katharina's mom at the abortion clinic. Katharina's mom carries it to 87, where it gets ripped off in the fight with what she doesn't realize is her actual daughter. Somehow it stays there at the lake until Jonas and Martha find it in 2019, the day that his father, Michael Kahnwald, commits suicide. And then it has a real twisty path. Let's not even try to follow it. But I should point out that because we heard this story, hey, have you heard about the woman who drowned in the lake? That really sounds an awful lot like in Altworld, Magnus and them had the thing about, have you heard the story about the monster in the cave? Ugh, what could that possibly mean? Could there be somebody...
Waller's bear.
Waller's bear is living in the cave. We love it. A part that I guess begins to fill in some backstory, H.G. Tannhaus and his adoptive granddaughter Charlotte have a talk. She's asking her grandfather if he can rewind time. This seems to be a callback to Season 1, where she saw Jonas and the dead bird, and Jonas is like, I'm here to save somebody from dying. And she's like, could you save this bird? Long story short, she approaches what she thinks is her grandfather and is like, can you save somebody? That inspires him to tell the story of her, his son, his daughter-in-law, and his grandchild. But they died when a truck forced their car into the river. The grandchild was never found. But the same night that happened, two strange-looking women, and I want to hear from you guys who you think these strange-looking women are, they brought infant Charlotte to him. They told him everything would be taken from him, but then he'd be given everything. So, two questions, actually. Who were the two women who brought baby Charlotte, which is once again Noah and Elizabeth's child, and gave it to H.G. Tannhaus, and is H.G.'s grandchild, who was in that car that went into the river that was never found, are they alive?
All right, so I got this one. That is exactly what Elizabeth and Charlotte were sent to do. From the future.
Oh my!
They
gosh.
drive. They're the ones driving the truck. They're the ones who show up with the baby.
Oh, that would be brutal to do. But you're right.
They're the ones who would have access to the baby knows all this
Mic
stuff.
drop.
Oh, my goodness. Oh, my God.
That was their task.
Lamb coming
That's
through.
got to be it. That's got to be it.
I know. It sounds good, doesn't it? I
Yeah.
could write this
It
shit.
sounds
Yeah.
good, but so terrible. Oh, that's terrible if Charlotte and Elizabeth...
Charlotte gives herself up.
Charlotte gives herself up. Elizabeth takes her own daughter. But that's the only way they can all exist. Oh,
Exactly.
my God, how terrible. Oh.
Why do they have to kill his son and
Because
their family?
because it always happened.
Fun.
Oh, how terrible.
They're also awful people.
Charlotte, after she learns this story from HG, she goes to the bus stop. I always think to myself, why is this bus stop here? It seems to be in the middle of nowhere. Why do we need a bus stop here?
But we did see the bus come, and my favorite character was driving it. The German guy with that crazy, like, Lemmy Kellmeister mustache.
I feel like everybody's had a bus driver who looks like that. He's
Yeah.
timeless.
And for whatever reason, in the English dub, he has a southern accent.
Oh, yeah,
great.
of course. And she's there. She's just found out this thing that she doesn't know anything about her parents, which, of course, is going to be such a big part of her life, we know, going forward. She's there at the serendipitous right moment. Her future husband, the father of her two children, Peter, walks off. What did you guys think of the actor who played young Peter? There were times where I thought, oh, my God, this guy looks perfect. And then there were other times I was like, I'm not sure he matches up great. What did you think of the matching of the two actors, old Peter and now we see young Peter?
I feel like with the show, it's just so easy to see what you want to see. You know, I mean, we talked season 2 about Ulrich and how every iteration of him is just perfect with the high cheekbones. But I think that they just look for, you know, one or two distinguishing features and cast for that and expect the people watching to fill in the blanks.
I think there's only like 10 different people in Germany, and they're all clones.
That makes the most sense. But at times I was looking at him, I was like,
cannot
he
believe
really
this
matches
about
up.
the two women.
Oh, you're stuck on that. It's got to be that, doesn't it?
Yes.
Oh, but why does Stanhouse's children, son and daughter-in-law, have to die?
Yeah.
Oh, okay, boy. So tragic. One other thing happens in 1987, what I would call Prime World, and that is Inez and Mikkel, who had seemingly been in witness protection because oldest Ulrich had tried to kidnap him before. They return home. One interesting point about this is in season 2, we had seen Inez, in the 80s Inez, call Mikkel at times. She referred to him as Michael around Egon, but at times she was calling him Mikkel. Here, she is calling him Michael. He's officially made the switch.
I still don't remember. Tell me if I'm forgetting why Inez is torn out of the family picture.
That's a great point. In our Prime World, we don't know why Inez is torn out of the photo. Is that a question you feel like you have to know? In the alt world, it's a different family. It's the Nielsen family, and Ulrich's torn out. But, of course, that kind of makes sense. He had cheated. He got divorced. But we never know why Inez and Hannah have trouble in the Prime World. Any guesses?
I don't know, but that is something that I would like to see wrapped up. That's on my wrap-up list.
Okay, all right. It's because you guessed the two women so perfectly. Lamb, any thoughts on why Inez and Hannah have a strained relationship?
I don't know. I never liked Inez. She's weird to me because she seems so nice, and then you see her drugging the child so she can take him home and have him as her pet. I don't know.
Inez
I never liked her, so I assume that they eventually saw through her craziness.
All right, let's go deep into this. Child Inez seems cool, likes pulling naughty magazines from her dad's private stash and sharing it with friends. Middle-aged nurse Inez, she lost a child. Remember how sad that was? She lost a child, becomes a nurse, adopts this boy who's been abandoned seemingly in time, is drugging him, but possibly drugging him because he's having trouble sleeping. And then oldest Inez, she takes his suicide note, this boy she adopted and loved, and follows its instructions not to open until a certain date. So I guess I'm saying I'm on Team Inez.
Oh, Team Inez. Interesting.
All right.
Tiny, do you want to break the tie? How you feel?
I feel sorry for her. I guess I'm on Team Inez as well.
All right.
I have a callback here.
Yeah.
Just to go deeper in my revelation.
Yeah.
The son and daughter have to die so that Tannhaus is willing to take on a baby. If he didn't just have that loss, he would find some other way to take. He's too old. This isn't his thing. He already raised kids. But now that they're dead, that's the impetus. That's what will make him
Charlotte's
take
so mad about it? I mean, it seemed like a really sad story. I mean, but
she's going to steal. I mean, this is what's weird. Having to kill these innocent people, that's one terrible thing. That does cause Elizabeth, even though now Elizabeth is part of it, that does cause Elizabeth an awful lot of pain. We know because of what we saw her in season 2. She's so upset that the baby was taken from her. And it causes Noah so much pain that his child is taken from him that he becomes... Possibly that's the reason why he's especially the worst, right up there with cleft-lip 3 on evil people. I don't know. Tiny, you have often been on Team Charlotte listening through these podcasts. How do you feel alt-world Charlotte's having an affair with Ulrich? Prime world Charlotte has been thrown to the future and is seemingly, as Lamb has brilliantly guessed, going to steal herself and give her to Townhouse. Are you still on Team Charlotte?
I am on Team Charlotte. I think she's smart. She's been... dealt a pretty odd hand, and she's doing the best with it. But I think she's a loving mother.
And daughter.
And daughter.
I think she just knows if I don't live this life, I can't live. Everything blows up. There's something special about that relationship in here. Like we have all these other weird relationships where people go back and forward in time and meet up with their younger selves or older selves. Lots of weird stuff there. This is the only one that creates that kind of weird paradoxical loop. And I do think that there's something more there. I think that's going to be a bigger linchpin in this. They keep mentioning the one that starts it all, and I don't think it's the hair lips.
Wow.
Okay.
I keep coming back to this.
Here first, #Winden Caves podcast.
I know. Let's do it.
Although it all got dropped at the same time. So I'm sure there are some people that already know the answers to the last 2 episodes.
Oh, yeah. No, we have some double L's.
Loyal listeners.
Who have been telling us, they binged the whole thing that first weekend. So we apologize. We're dragging it out a bit. We're trying to get as many people on the Double T
Time travelers
train as possible. So we did see a brief scene of the apocalypse in 2020 where Alt Martha never rescues Jonas and he goes down to his own basement, we assume, to survive the apocalypse. I was cheering. I was like, yay, they changed time, even though they might not have changed time. We'll have to see. But in post-2020 apocalypse, Claudia, boy, you want to talk about a bizarre couple episodes she had. She buries her daughter, Regina, tragic relationship of this mother and daughter who really never had any great time together. And then she sees Alt-World Claudia. Alt-World Claudia, I want to guide you into the light. There are 2 groups fighting for time travel, light and dark. Join Eva's side. You can't trust Jonas. He belongs to the dark. He wants you to untie the knot. Eva wants to save both worlds. Everything in the loop repeats. You got to make sure it happens. You must make sure Adam never unties. Lead them along the same path again and again. Claudia then reads the book, this book we've been following for all the seasons with the triquetra on the cover that Alt Claudia gave her. What do you think? She goes to the power plant. She sees this light version of the God particle. Jonas, the version of him that survived the apocalypse, in his basement comes. He tells Claudia he can resolve everything. And I assume at this point, Claudia starts lying to him. He points out that, hey, the old version of you, the old Claudia, didn't tell me about Martha's death. How should we feel about Team Claudia, which I've been on an awful lot? How do you feel based on what Claudia knows, knowing that she is technically Team Eva? Both versions of her, I assume.
Yeah, I got off the Team Claudia train at the end of season 2, really when we found out that Adam was Jonas around that time.
Okay, how do you feel about any version of Claudia, Lamb?
I was fully on her side earlier when it was the old wild hair Claudia. I felt like she was really trying to move things forward, and now I realize that it was all a lie and manipulation, and I feel wounded.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I'm not happy.
I like this actress a lot, and I think that's why I always tend to, and I guess of the 3 versions of Claudia, the middle-aged Claudia, I just like her a lot. And because White Devil, old Claudia, did apologize to Egon, was trying to make things right before she got shot and killed by Noah, I don't know. Maybe, once again, I'm having a hard time deciding what team I'm on. This is tough. Speaking of tough, R.I.P. Prime World Peter. He's going back to the zone. Elizabeth doesn't want to go. Young Elizabeth is sure her mother's dead. Franziska's dead, she's sure. One fun little Easter egg for everybody. Remember, Elizabeth and Franziska had a bit of a sister argument back in season 1 because Elizabeth was stealing Franziska's lipstick. Here, post-apocalypse 2020, Elizabeth is wearing a sweater that we see Franziska wear in season 1. So the sisters are still sharing stuff. But of course, all of this is just set up for this scavenger to kill Peter. Oh, could young Noah have saved Peter because he knew he got killed?
For sure he could have, and for sure he chose not to.
You agree, Lamb? How do you feel about that?
I don't think that he registers much to Jonas, honestly. I don't think that Peter is someone that Jonas worries about or considers a player in this.
You need Peter for Charlotte, Elizabeth, and Franziska to live, so you do need him, but I guess by this point in the timeline, you didn't need him anymore. It was a tragic fate. Tiny, you said it was the most painful death. Any final things you want to say about Prime World Peter?
R.I.P.
Okay, all right.
He was a good guy. He really was.
Yeah,
he was one of the few parents in here that wasn't abandoning their children willy-nilly or beating them or whatnot. So I do feel for the guy. So R.I.P. Peter.
Elizabeth is left with nothing, so where does she go? She goes to the cave in young Noah, and thus the cycle repeats itself.
There we go.
Okay. Final bit of timeline to talk about is 2053 post-apocalypse. Adam tells Charlotte that her path will always lead to him and Elizabeth, her daughter. Adam says Charlotte must play her part. Charlotte asks Adam, will you play your part? Adam doesn't technically answer and say yes. He says Eva will never achieve her goal. What do you think Charlotte thinks Adam's part in all this is? Just the same, or?
I think it's putting Martha in the God particle.
Oh, okay, that's good. That's a good one. And he definitely did it, so.
Yeah, that's got to been tough.
The God particle with both apocalypse power. That's super strong.
Yeah.
Now with the power of 2 apocalypse.
Right. Price of 1.
Elizabeth and Charlotte hug Franziska. The family, the triquetra of Dopplers, hug it out. Then Elizabeth and Charlotte go into the God particle, just as we had seen Agnes go in previously. Now, the character we've been calling Scarface, we don't want to say her name just yet because the show hasn't been 100% clear on it. But this is the character who in season 1 we always say butted Jonas in the face with a rifle and said, welcome to the future. Scarface has locked Alt Martha up in a cage, the Martha who is pregnant with Jonas's child in cleft-lip 3. Adam comes to see her. He says, Tannhaus believed he was creating a paradise, a world outside your world and my world. But Adam says he knows what paradise is. A darkness which nothing exists. Both apocalypses are needed. Scarface then releases Alt Martha, demands she undress. Adam ties her to that altar, and he's trying to kill the origin, cleft-lip 3. It's born in both worlds. It needs the energy of both worlds to kill it. We're looking at absolute annihilation. Did it succeed? Or did it just really cause the problem to begin with? What do you think happened when Alt Martha, who is pregnant with cleft-lip 3, is tied and hit with that powerful God particle? Any thoughts?
I think Jonas is just going to keep making things worse.
And this is Adam's version of Jonas making things worse.
Yeah, he obviously things have gone wrong for him because he's all burnt up. So I think he's made some poor choices in the past.
Several poor choices.
Right.
And sometimes it's by what if his poor choices have been listening to himself.
Right.
Right.
Listening to anybody. I don't know what the right thing to do here is, or I don't know how he came to this conclusion that the God particle needs, the double God particle needs to kill her. I've never seen a God particle turn into a cylinder like that, so that's new.
Good work, God particle.
Yeah.
Way to keep trying new things and growing.
Right. I'm still trying to figure out where the white one came from.
Yeah, that's the white one, which
we all just ran off after that.
That was cool. Yeah. That was a good one. Maybe that'll get us to paradise somehow. Somebody get us to paradise.
Right. Throw her in that one. That'll kill her.
2 episodes left. Before we get to your listener feedback, let's go quickly around the horn. Tiny, what ending are we getting? Happy ending, tragic ending, bittersweet ending? What do you think?
I think bittersweet is the way it's going to go. I think ending is a win, really, for every character. Some sort of finality, even though they don't feel that way. But I think it's going to feel bittersweet.
Lamb. Happy ending, sad ending, bittersweet ending. How you going?
I think it's going to be sad because it all starts over again. I think Jonas fails. I think he's destined to reach for the sky, reach for the stars, and come up short.
I'm holding on to hope, listeners. There's no reason why I should say this. I'm going happy ending. I don't know why.
Wow, Bubba.
What is a happy ending?
A happy ending, and I've been thinking about this, and it's what I pitched to you on the last podcast, Tiny, is these two worlds are two worlds that keep making mistakes. But they keep making seemingly different mistakes. But the show has always showed us a triangle, a triquetra, three sides. The happy ending is that somehow, now these two universes will exist and keep having their terrible trouble, but somehow we're going to spin to the third alt world, and that's going to be paradise. I have no idea how. I have no idea how in 2 episodes you could get to the point where we listeners and viewers would understand it, but I'm holding out hope.
All right. So I get this. And I have noticed that on the book there's the triquetra.
Right.
And they keep talking about just the two, so there must be a third. To pull off an ending like that, to get to that inflection point and go to a third option, they're going to have someone who understands what happened before. It can't just all start anew. So who comes into that new third world with knowledge, with memory of what transpired in the other two?
Wohler.
Just his eye and arm will be there.
Right, a full Wohler will come in. I figured it out, everybody.
I've got it. Has anyone seen this book? Look at that. It explains everything.
Do you have an answer, Lamb, for your own question?
I think it's going to be Tannenbaum.
Tannhaus. Yeah,
Tannhaus,
okay. Yeah, I like that.
Tannhaus will be the person that explains it all.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Hey, I'm down with that.
Sure.
Listeners, we're going to now get to your feedback. And once again, if you hashtag Winden Caves Podcast, Caves plural, podcast singular, hashtag Winden Caves Podcast, that's an entry into this contest to get the book. Tiny, do you want to read this first bit of feedback we got from Twitter?
Yeah, on Twitter, it's Joseph at Joe Bear. He says, I will be watching Dark Season 3 at pace with at double PHQ because that's the only future for me. That's what you think, Joe Bear.
I know, Joe Bear, we got to have Lamb draw the infinity symbol for you and explain that it may not be the only future for you. But thank you so much. Thank you for entering the contest. You're one of the people who can win this book. I want to point out our next bit of feedback is Tiffany, who's at Nifferty. That's Nifferty on Twitter. She just put out this, responded to us on a tweet, and she said, my first thoughts, Jonas is giving off some Major Pigpen vibes.
I've had the same thought this whole time. Like, do these people travel through time and have all this equipment?
Water off ahead of the apocalypse.
Why don't they wash their face? No one washes their face.
Oh, so tragic.
I do feel that there might be a metaphor in here somewhere where the dirtier they get is the deeper into this whole time travel conspiracy thing that they are.
Susan at Barbasu at BARBISU. Bubba and Tiny, nice shout out for us. Thanks for filling in the details I missed from Season 1 and Season 2. Hashtag Winden Caves Podcast is helping me sort it all out. Is this the season when Joffrey returns, referencing the other Double P podcast, hashtag Dark of Thrones?
Oh, thank you, Barbasu, who is part of the at Geek Girl Soup podcast crew. We don't know if Joffrey returns in this world because this is the darkest timeline. Hey, shout out to community. But thank you so much, Susan. It's so wonderful of you to say it. We got a question that, let's see if you guys can answer, from somebody named Sarucci on Twitter. That's Sue the Rucci, just as you might expect on Twitter. They write, what are the odds that not a single time traveler in Dark was claustrophobic?
Kind of just got to get used to your reality in Winden.
Right. Are you claustrophobically? I'm going down in those caves or getting in that cave to go through the tunnel.
I'm desperately afraid of heights, but yet I'm oddly comforted by tight places. And so I actually have spent a lot of time spelunking in my past. My misspent youth. My wife, I remember one time we went to Mammoth Caves, which is close by. Great place. And they used to do, I don't know if they still do it, but this was years and years ago, they would do a wild cave tour where they would take you. It was just you and a guide and like 4 other people, and you'd go way deep into the caves. You'd spend 8 hours going off track. And the first room they put you in is to test if you can handle being in a tight cave.
Oh, wow.
It was literally maybe a foot and a half, and you had to...
Oh, wow. That sounds so scary.
Yeah, you had to climb through it, and my wife didn't make it. She ended right then. She was done. The wild cave tour ended after 15 minutes for her.
Oh, man.
Is that when you found out she was your aunt?
No, I was going to say, is that the moment that she found out the guide was her future self bringing her down there?
You cannot go on.
I did something not claustrophobic, but Carlsbad Cavern in New Mexico, which is this huge cave with the hugest indoor kind of cavern, open air kind of space. And they have a cave called the New Cave. They call it the New Cave because it was discovered in like the 1940s as opposed to the Carlsbad Cavern. And they take you in there, and everybody goes in there, and it's just a small group, and you have to bring a flashlight because there's not any electricity. And the guy goes, okay, everybody turn off the flashlight. You'll be in complete darkness. And you all turn them off. The guide says, if you stay in this for a full 2 minutes or 3 minutes, you'll go blind. It was like, what?
Wow.
I don't think that's true.
Sarucci.
He might not be a medical doctor.
Sarucci, write us back and tell us if you've had any time on any caves. Listeners, write us back. Give us your feedback on all of Dark, Season 1, Season 2, Season 3 for our next podcast. We're going to have a big podcast, and we want you to be a part of it. Once again, at PHQ on Twitter and Instagram, Facebook.com/PHQ. Tiny, do you want to read this next bit of feedback?
Sure. It's from Bill at Bill Cava. They're doing the heavy lifting over here at #Winden Caves Podcast. Amazing recap and analysis on Double E.
Double E?
That'd be each episode. Check it out.
Thank you so much, Bill. You are entered to win. And our last bit of feedback this week is from YouTube. It's from Michael J. Cox, and it's just a kind compliment. Michael wrote, love y'all's work and chemistry. Keep up the informative and fun pod. Oh, thank you so much,
Thanks,
Michael.
Michael J.
Once again, listeners, give us these #Winden Cave Podcast shout-outs. You're going to be eligible to win this book if you give us written reviews. Now, you can't just give us like a star review. You have to give us a written review so we have a name, a person to give this prize to. Once again, we got new ones from Yep OK, BB and GA, Joe Bear, and Goog Caddish. We love them. We'll read your reviews on the air. We'll read your thoughts on the air. Everybody, give us your feedback. We want you to be part of the time travel crew as we go into the future and review the final episode, all of Dark in its entirety. Now, Tiny, do you remember our segment for Season 3?
Our segment for Season 3 is we read a passage from the book that we're giving away, and your job is to still want it after we read from it.
So, we've read you a bit from the beginning of the book. We've jumped forward in time and read you a bit from the end of the book. Today, we're going to page 33, and we're going to have our guest, Lamb, read the section of the book on page 33 just to give you a taste of what you could win. So, Lamb, take it away.
Do your best Killian impression.
The passenger seat next to the driver's seat. He turned the ignition and started the car. At the moment, his only wish was to reach his home as soon as possible and take the influence of the worst 2 days of his life with a hot shower.
Wow, pretty exciting, listeners. We're giving this away. It's a tie-in book for Dark from Netflix. It's the English language version. We hope, because sometimes the writing is pretty awkward, but we're going to give this away. We're going to mail this out to you, to one lucky listener, as we pull a name from the bowl in next week's podcast. Tiny, next week it's over. It's the beginning of the podcast. Get it? Ending and beginning.
Yeah, the ending and the beginning.
Lamb, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to say as a shout-out to the Double L loyal listeners?
I want to thank you all for having me. This is a great time. I didn't know that there were that many other people that enjoyed talking about this show because at home, my wife wants nothing to do with German shows where people just stare at each other a lot. But it's It's fascinating to me, and I love sharing this stuff with everyone else. So,
cool. Thank you so much for joining us and for the enlightenment with the Elizabeth and Charlotte. Unbelievable.
So good. Spoiler alert. We're going to have to put spoiler alert.
You did.
We talk
You
about
opened
this
the spoiler.
podcast. All right, Tiny.
Future spoiler.
Are you ready to enter the God particle and go to the end/beginning of dark next week?
Yes.
Okay.
I would guess that we're going to do our
Okay, sure.
Okay.
You ready?
Yeah.
And we'll talk to you next time you go deep, 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 deep in the Winden Caves.